What's up, YouTube? Zero here. And today I have an amazing yet simple Hitmonlee plus Golem deck in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build, which is on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll talk about why each of these individual cards are amazing. Then I'll talk about why each of these cards play well with each other. Then I'll talk about why you should be using this deck, or maybe using this deck. Before we get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Without further ado, let's talk about this Golem plus Hitmonlee deck. First, let's talk about the basics, the Pokemon in this deck. I'm keeping this deck extremely simple, which I'll talk about in a second as to why I'm doing that, with only 2 Hitmonlee and then double the evolution chain of Golem. First, I want to talk about Hitmonlee. Hitmonlee is an extremely good Pokemon. For those of you who don't know, Hitmonlee has Stretch Kick for 1 energy. This attack is going to deal 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Now, this is very good because a lot of times your opponent is going to be hiding a Pokemon on the bench that they don't want to take damage. So Hitmonlee is going to ignore the fact that an enemy has a Pokemon in that active slot that they want there to take damage, and you're going to hit for 30 damage a Pokemon on your opponent's bench. This also works very well when coupled with Cyrus, because of course, as you are damaging Pokemon on your opponent's bench, you're going to be hitting them for damage, allowing you to utilize Cyrus to pull out those Pokemon from your opponent's bench, which is why I have 2 Cyruses in here. And for those of you who don't know what Cyrus does, you switch in one of their benched Pokemon that has damage on it to the active slot. So doing damage to every benched Pokemon that your opponent has, it is going to allow you to move one of them into the active slot when you are ready to deal damage with your Geodude, Graveler, or Golem. Now, Hitmonlee isn't all great, unfortunately, because it does have the Stretch Kick that attacks for 30 damage to one of your opponent's benched Pokemon. If there are no benched Pokemon, Hitmonlee is just there as cannon fodder. It's not going to do any damage. It cannot attack the Pokemon in the active slot. So if your opponent doesn't get enough Pokemon to play one on the bench, or they just choose not to put a Pokemon on the bench, your Hitmonlee is just going to be in that active slot taking damage. That's not the worst thing in the world, considering if you lose Hitmonlee, it's only 1 point. That is a benefit of this deck. There are no EX Pokemon, so you're only losing 1 point at a time. But unfortunately, Hitmonlee cannot attack the opponent in the active slot. I've gone through many different Pokemon in this first slot coupled with Golem. I like Hitmonlee the most, again, because it attacks the benched Pokemon. It attacks the Pokemon that your opponent probably doesn't want you to touch, because those are the Pokemon they're waiting to evolve, or the Pokemon they're waiting to build up energy on. They don't want those Pokemon taking damage, so you're bypassing that. That's why I like Hitmonlee the most in this spot, coupled with Golem. So now let's talk about our Geodudes, our Gravelers, and our Golem. Geodude, it doesn't matter too much which Geodude you put in as your Geodude. There are multiple Geodudes in the game. I do have multiple Geodudes in my deck just because I haven't unlocked two of the one I prefer. I prefer just the simple Geodude 1 energy for tackle for 20 damage so I could get some early damage off and easy damage off. Now this Geodude is going to be found in the genetic Apex Pikachu deck, so if you are looking for the one I prefer, which is the Geodude 1 energy for tackle for 20, that's going to be in your Pikachu deck or Pikachu pack. Graveler, again, I like to keep it simple, so I'm going to do 2 energy, 1 fighting, 1 colorless for lunge out for 40. If you already have 1 energy on your Geodude, you're just going to have to add 1 more for Graveler to attack for 40, which again is something that I like. I just like to keep it simple. So I want to just equip as minimal energy on my Pokemon as possible in order to attack while I'm building up for Golem. Because Golem does take a lot of energy. So I would like to get a couple of attacks out with Geodude and Graveler before I get to my Golem. So I am weakening my opponent. Now the Graveler you see on the left-hand side, this is going to be the one from the Mythical Island deck. It's going to deal 40 damage for that 2 energy, the one fighting, the one colorless. Last, but most certainly not least in terms of the actual Pokemon, is Golem. And this Golem is absolutely epic. The one you're going to want is from the Mythical Island deck. And this Golem from the Mythical Island deck has 160 HP. It deals 120 damage with its Guard Press move. On top of dealing 120 damage, during your opponent's next turn, Golem will take minus 30 damage from attacks. So this is absolutely awesome. Not only does Golem have 160 HP and deals 120 damage, but if you've attacked with Guard Press, you are going to take 30 less damage. This vastly increases the survivability of Golem. I have run through a lot of very powerful Pokemon because of Guard Press. You can even be weakened as Golem. Say you took 20 early damage for your Geodude or your Graveler, or 30 extra damage. You can take that extra damage and still survive a powerful hit from a powerful Pokemon. There are some very powerful Pokemon in the game, EX Pokemon, Leafeon, that only deals 70 damage. Weevil, that by itself, if attacking an injured opponent, only deals 70 damage. You have Miss Magus, that only deals 70 damage. If you've dealt a Guard Press and one of those EX Pokemon attack, they're only going to deal 40 damage. That's absolutely insane that you as a non-EX Pokemon are going to completely obliterate certain EX Pokemon in this game. I have fared so well with this Golem, and again, this is the Golem from the Mythical Island deck that deals 120 damage for 4 energy for Guard Press and takes minus 30 damage from attacks when you've dealt that damage. I have won so many battles with getting Golem going, it is unreal. Now, I do want to talk about a drawback while I am mentioning that. It does take a little while to build up Golem. Of course, it's a couple of evolutions on top of 4 energy. But let's talk about what's going to lessen that blow a little bit. You're going to want 2 Brock in this deck. Brock is going to be extremely important for Golem. And what Brock does is you take a fighting energy from your energy zone and you can attach it to Golem or Onix. Of course, I don't have Onix in this deck, but I do have Golem. So if you are able to pull Brock, now that 4 energy is down to 3. Now you only have 3 turns in which you have to attach an energy. Then you can pull out Brock and get another energy, and you're ready to go. If you do get 2 Brocks And your Golem, let's say your Golem isn't powered up, only has 1 energy on it. Well, now it's only going to take 2 more turns to power up your Golem. Let's say it has no energy on it. It's only going to take 2 turns with 2 Brocks and then 2 extra energy from your energy zone to power up Golem. So if you're lucky enough to pull your Brocks consecutively, you can power up Golem very quickly. So Brock does lessen the blow a lot, and Golem is extremely powerful, especially when coupled with Brock. I have a couple of basics in this deck, Professor's Research and Pokeball. This is, of course, going to allow me to get through my Pokemon and deck quicker so I can get the cards I need. Pokemon Communication is extremely important in this deck and works really well in a deck that doesn't have a lot of Pokemon. What Pokemon Communication does, for those of you who don't know, is you choose a Pokemon in your hand and you switch it with a random Pokemon in your deck. This is an extremely useful and powerful card, especially when you don't have a lot of Pokemon cards in your deck. I have a total of 8 in my deck. 2 Hitmonlee, 2 Geodude, 2 Graveler, 2 Golem. What's really nice about this is, let's say I have Hitmonlee in the active slot. I have Geodude on the field, as you can see in this video right now, and I have Graveler in my hand. So that's 3 Pokemon cards already. Now I have another Hitmonlee in my hand, so that's 4 Pokemon cards. If I get a Pokemon Communication and I decide to sacrifice my Hitmonlee, out of the 4 Pokemon cards left in my deck, 2 of them are Golem. That means I have a 50% chance to pull a Golem from my deck. That is extremely important because, like I said, Golem does take a little while to get set up. But once it gets going, it's going to be extremely hard for your opponent to defeat. So having Pokemon Communication allowing me to put a card back in my deck that I don't necessarily need in the moment to potentially draw a card that I need is extremely crucial. So Pokemon Communication is extremely crucial for this deck. Now, last but not least, I have a few Pokemon tools. And for those of you who don't know, you can get Pokemon Communication from the Dialga deck or the Dialga pack. Now let's talk about, last but not least, the 2 Pokemon tools that I have. I have Giant Cape and I have Rocky Helm. If you've played for a little while, you'll probably see these a lot. They are 2 typical Pokemon tools in which Giant Cape increases the HP of the Pokemon it's attached to by 20 HP. Rocky Helm, every time the active Pokemon is attacked, is going to deal an additional 20 damage. Both of these are very useful in this deck, so it's hard to just pick one and go with 2 for just one of these tools. I like attaching the Rocky Helm to Hitmonlee to start off the match. This is because Hitmonlee cannot deal damage to the active Pokemon. So if the active Pokemon does attack and you do have a Rocky Helm, you're going to deal damage to the active Pokemon with the Rocky Helm. Rocky Helm can also be good later in the game to attach to Golem to help deal even more damage if the opponent does decide to attack. We're already taking 30 less damage as Golem, so dealing extra 20 damage every time the opponent decides to attack is pretty awesome. Giant Cape is great on Golem as well. Golem has 160 HP. Giant Cape is going to make it 180. And then if you get a guard press off, the opponent is dealing 30 less damage. So it's going to increase the survivability of Golem even more, which is absolutely awesome. Both of these have a place in this deck. However, if you want to do 2 of one of these tools instead of 1 of each, it's probably fine to do that as well. You can play around, see which tools you like the best, but personally I like having one of each. Like I mentioned, because the Rocky Helm is good to attach to Hitmonlee, so I can deal damage to the opponent in the active slot when I have Hitmonlee out there, because I'm not dealing damage to the opponent in the active slot when Hitmonlee is out there. And then I like Giant Cape on Golem just to increase its survivability even more. I absolutely love this deck. It is very simple, but it is absolutely epic. Golem is an awesome Pokemon. Not many people are using it right now, but it is extremely powerful. I recommend checking him out. Remember, this is the Golem from the Mythical Island deck. That's extremely important because there are multiple Golems in the game right now, so I recommend utilizing that Golem. Let me know in the comments section what you think of this deck. Do you like it? Do you love Golem as much as I do? I used to love Golem when Golem was first released way back when I first got Golem. Let me know in the comments section what you think of this deck. Have you used something similar? And if you haven't, are you gonna check this out now that you've watched this video? Thank you so much in advance for sticking around, and until next time, peace.